Okay, so I think we're live. So we're going to talk about the interpretation argument. Joe has a different version from one I've heard, and Albie doesn't even know what it is. So I'm hoping that Joe can sort of start from the beginning and present the argument. And we have Shamos who is willing to engage with the argument, which is so great. Somebody engaged with the argument and see how that goes. So Joe, I'm going to turn it over to you and maybe try to start as if you have people, because you do, who don't really know what the argument is, and especially not your version, and we'll just take it from there.
All right. Yeah, it's not too different. I think I'm just more tentative when I give it because I don't have the the philosophical background that's of the people who've given it. Certainly not the person who originated the argument or form of the argument, Gregory Dawes. But it's called the interpretation argument because it initially was ran against just talking about interpreting biblical texts. But I think it's more important that people realize that this is an argument about interpreting any divine communication, any communication from a divine being. And so it starts out by just saying this: the act of interpretation is inferring the intentions of the author of that communication. When you want to infer the intentions of an author of scripture, any like vocal communication, like text messages, anything, smoke signals, you're engaging in the process of inferring the intentions of the communicator, the person who's doing the smoke signals, the person who's communicating to you. And in order to try and say you're accurately interpreting the intentions of that communicator, what you want to do is you give a bunch of hypotheses, and you want to narrow down those hypotheses. Which hypotheses best or is the most accurate interpretation of a given communication? And so the argument notes that with a divine being, we don't have access to the intentions of this divine being. And if we don't have access to the intentions of the divine being, then it seems like we can't say that we're accurately interpreting the intentions of that divine being. Where you can't say that we are accurately interpreting biblical texts, or we're accurately interpreting our personal experience with this divine being, or that kind of, or like a prophet sent by him, or the prophecies that are said in his different scripture. We don't have anything to outside of the communication itself that would allow us to infer the intentions of the communicator. And so I'm interested to know, how is it that someone who believes that this divine being exists and that they're accurately interpreting that divine being's communication with respect to the intentions of the divine being, and how they could say that the evidence they're giving to support their interpretation is I guess better if it can outcompete other people who claim to have evidence that supports their claim that they are accurately interpreting a divine author. Because we can all appeal to the classical concepts that we use to interpret human authors in order to segue into saying we can interpret a divine author. That's something that everyone has equal access to. That's a claim to evidence. Everyone is on the level playing field. And the argument's asking, what's the edge? What makes it so your account, your hypotheses can stand up against other hypotheses that we can narrow down? Now, there are a bunch of issues with the certain type of divine being that you're saying you're accurately interpreting, and we can get into those. But I just want to ask questions. Does it make sense so far?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
maybe we can have Shamos speak for a little while
sure.
on the basics, and then go back to you later.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, well, I'll just start with general. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just start with general ways that we infer intentions of humans, right? So there's a few ways that this is done. One way is we can just generalize from our own knowledge of ourselves and how we are out independent of any experience with someone else, right? So like one example would be that we understand that there's a need for humans to have sustenance, right? It's just we need sustenance. We infer from that to other people, right? Without having experience of other people to make the inference, we make the inference from inside of ourselves. So like if I were to see Joe, walk to a refrigerator and grab something to drink and then start drinking it, I could infer just based on the knowledge of what it's like to be thirsty from myself. Generalize certain type of intentions just from understanding that we have similar needs and stuff like that. Well, there's other ways too. For example, through experiences or observations, right? So if one way we could do it through an observation would be if we observe Joe always go to the bathroom at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, right? And so we can infer based on seeing, inductively, we see Joe has gone to the bathroom, a lot of times or every time at this time. So we can infer that if it's 2 o'clock, Joe will probably go to the bathroom, right? That Joe will have the intention to go to the bathroom. Okay, that's just based on an observation. Another way would be like an experience, right? So if, for example, if Joe's given this example one time, and I'll try to use it just for the ease of the discussion. Say that I have a bitchy stepmom, right, or mother-in-law, and my girlfriend knows that that mother-in-law checks her text messages, right? And she's told me before that I've had an experience with my girlfriend, and she says, listen, I'm going to say, whenever my mom's over, I'm going to type the exact phrase, I'm go to the store and get some milk, or whatever the phrase will be. And that will let me know that her mom's there, right? Without saying, hey, my mom's there, please be cool, be nice, or something. She doesn't want to offend her mother. So I know based on that experience that when I see that message, right, and then in whatever experience she's texted me that before, and then her mother was there, then I can know. So with those, so those are some ways that we know can kind of infer intentions, right? So what my question is, when it comes to a divine author, what would prevent us from making through experiences with the divine, that like to try to infer things based on observation, right? Entity would do something 9 out of 10 times. Wouldn't it be rational to infer that it would, it's similar to the 2 o'clock experience? We could infer that from a being. Now I'll be quiet because I want you to respond. But I think the problem is, if he were to say that we couldn't even infer from our experiences, then that's going to be a problem, right? Because see, I can infer general things about people independent of experiences just based on our general needs as humans, but that is going to cut me off from a lot of other things. For example, it would cut me off from example like the milk example, right? Because in the milk example, I don't know internally that every time she texts that message that, all humans do this, we all need this, blah, 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 I do it from an experience. So what I'm saying is, if we can generalize that we can use experience to validate intentionality from humans, why couldn't we do that from the divine?
Okay, so you brought up, there are three examples of ways that we infer intentions about other humans, right? We can generalize from knowledge about ourselves. Through observation, we can use induction, and also through experience. And the milk example was an example of experience. and you're saying that we can inference the intentions of a divine through experience that we've had with the divine in kind of the same way. Is that correct?
Right. Right.
Okay. So, Joe, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. Yeah. It seems like you're saying that all we have to do is just take our background experiences with other humans, with the intentions stemming from other humans, and just parlay those into what would consist of our background. Well, for two of what you've said, two of the arguments. The other one is about experience with the divine, which I'm separating for now with this point. Yeah, we could just parlay our experiences with other human beings and use that in order to infer the intentions of a divine being. Now, the issue with
I'm not
that
saying
is,
that. I actually disagree with that. So before you go into that, that wasn't what I was saying, and I do disagree with that. I absolutely agree we can't infer from other experiences or generalizations about ourselves to the divine. I wasn't saying that. So.
what? Well, you're talking about our observations of a routine, but that's something based off of humans having routine. You also were using my example of the annoying stepmom, but that's based off of our past experience with human beings having annoying stepmoms and a myriad of other past experiences we have with human intentions. So I guess I'm
I
a bit
disagree with that.
confused.
Well, look,
Okay.
I don't think we have to bring in that where I'm inferring from our past experiences of other humans, right? Like I don't think that in the case of the stepmom, we're doing it in a generalized sense, right? So I know I'm talking about my girlfriend, right? I've had interactions with my girlfriend, okay? She's told me, communicated with me that when she uses this phrase, it's going to mean her stepmom's there. And then when she communicates that phrase, I've checked and her stepmom has been there, right? So it just seems more likely under that, without generalizing to other humans that have bitchy stepmoms or anything like that. It's, she says, when she says X, Y is the case. She says X, and I've noticed that Y is the case, right? So what if the divine entity says that, X is communicates X thing, and then Y will be the state that I should expect to see. He communicates X, and then I see state Y. Would it be rational to assume from that experience of just being agent that, because it seems like we use the same example for our girlfriend.
Yeah, but you're still using your experience with human beings and extrapolating it to, or I guess using it to inform your experience with the divine being. And the question that I was going to ask is, what's stopping others from using that same, that same type of hypothesis in order to support their claim that they're accurately interpreting the intentions of a divine being?
Well, because what I'm saying is, outside of intentions, we also use our experiences to infer many things, not just intentionality, right? And so like if I, touch a stove and I get burned, I infer that, and then if I touch a stove, I could get burned. So what I'm saying is, it just seems like that we make certain inferences based on certain experiences, right? So what I'm saying is, I'm not generalizing necessarily from humans. I'm just saying that from experiences with agents, right? And I would assume that we're at least going to grant that this divine being is an agent, minimally, right? Without inferring some manner of what his intentions are. We just know he's capable of intentionality, right? He's an agent. So what I'm saying, I might be generalizing from agency, right? That, look, we're agents, we're capable of intentionality. And I know about inferring intentionality, not just from humans, but from agents, is that when excommunication comes across, and then they say that refers to some scenario in the world, and then if I come across that phrase or that communication, and I notice time and time again that there's the same scenario in the world, I don't understand why it wouldn't be rational to infer that that was the being's intention, right? I mean, it could be. I agree that there could be some different intention behind it. Maybe he's trying to trick us, maybe this or that. But that would apply to all humans, right? We just say this is more likely under the case. So I don't see why that wouldn't apply to the divine being.
Well, the thing is, you're saying that there's an. I mean, we can never know for sure with humans, but it seems like it's all the more with a divine being. But it also seems like, I mean, you're appealing to background information, background experiences with your girlfriend, for example. Background experience, I mean, you're appealing, you inferred from your experience of touching a stove to not, that, and you've made a hypothesis that if I touch that stove again, I'll get burned. Don't worry about trying to test that hypothesis. But the issue is it's a background experience. But what is the background experience you would have with a divine being that would inform your claim to accurately interpreting the communication with that divine being? Like, there's no wild God out there for you to have an experience with and have that inform your communication with this divine agent. So what is that's making up your background experience with this divine being that would inform your claim that you're accurately interpreting it?
So I'll give you an example, because this is what we do with all other agents that we come in contact with, right? And so the thing is this, that if you've ever heard studies of like feral children, right? There's been children that have had like little or no communication or ways to infer intentions, right? Because they just haven't had much communication with humans. Like there's been an example where a family just kind of slid the food under the door and stuff like that, and whatever and whatnot. So what I'm basically saying is, when it comes to an experience, there's always going to be a first. We can generalize the things that we know internally about ourselves as humans, but at a certain point with agents, there's a starting point, right? There's a point in time, and when we were young or born a baby, where we have our first experience with another agent, right? And then the slate's clean, we start from that experience, and then we build on it, right? So, I mean, that's the nature of all experiences, right? So there's some things we can infer about ourselves, but that only gives us a small window of intentions. We need experiences to build on complex things like the coded message relayed by your stepmom, not just when Joe grabs water and drinks it, I know that he intends, to sustain himself or whatever. So what I'm saying is, if we start from a blank slate when we're younger with our first experience of another human or agent, why not we just start with the same clean slate with God? Okay, so let's start with a clean slate. First thing, we have an experience with this God. He communicates some message, and then he says that message is going to correlate to a state of affairs. Okay, we'll tentatively take that as the case. So he communicates the message. We notice that it's the state of affairs. Okay, so then he communicates the message. This is the second time he's communicated the message. We notice the state of affairs. And then the third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. Fourth, fifth, sixth time, we have background information, namely the experience of the communication correlating with the state of affairs that it correlates with. So we would begin to build up a scope of background information as we have with all other human experiences or agent experiences. I think it might be better for that to just generalize, because I don't think there's a necessarily, I think there's some difference between inferring from myself as a human to God. I don't think that could be done. But I think we could do it observationally and experientially, not just inferring from ourselves as humans. So that would be, we would generate background information by repeated experiences.
Okay, so you're saying that God would, or the divine, I'm just going to say God for simplicity. God would just give you a communication, and then whatever he communicated would match up with some state, would be expected on some state of affairs in the future. And then the consistency of these things matching up is what would make your interpretation, make you think that your interpretation is accurate, and that would be the generated background information.
Right. I mean, I could give an analogy if you want to. Just something simple like, I have an experience with God. He tells me whatever. I'm God, this and that. And I don't like it when you use curse words. And when you use curse words, I'm going to give you a little shock, like a little electric shock. And I'm going to do that as a way to kind of condition you, or for there to be a repercussion to this action that I don't like. So I cuss, boom, I get shocked, right? Okay, and then I cuss a second time, I get shocked, and then 3 weeks later I fuck up and I bang my thumb, I cuss, I get shocked. Well, I can infer that from this divine being that based on the experience, right, that if I cuss, he'll be more likely, his intention will be to shock me, right? And I think it's rational because we have background information. Because when I've cussed, he shocked me, right? So he must have had if he's an agent, which I think we're granting, he had the intentional state to shock me, right? Because I was shocked. So yeah, so I'm saying that we could do that for just a host of different things.
So what was the, okay, he said that if you cussed, you would get shocked.
Yeah.
Would you think that how would that rule out the hypothesis that it would be if you cussed and then immediately blinked, you would be shocked? How would that state of affairs be inconsistent with the divine being communicating this to you?
Let's say that, I mean, we would have to rule that out from experience as well, right? So let's say I've cussed, okay, and at one time I blinked, right? And then the shock followed both of those things, right? Well, let's say that on another time, the second time I cussed and I didn't blink and I got shocked. Third time I cussed, didn't blink, got shocked. So now we have one experience of where the blinking has been followed by the shock, and two where it hasn't, right? And so I think over the generated amount of experiences, we could just say, well, it's more common that me cussing and I get shocked and I can infer God's intention to shock me is a result. I mean, I don't think it really matters in this discussion whether it's the result of the blink or the cuss, but I'm saying that if we wanted to determine if that was an issue to us, we could determine it through the experience, right? So let's say that maybe, let's do another scenario where I blink every time, right? And I'm like, holy shit, maybe he's not intending to shock me when I cuss, he's intending to shock me when I blink. Well, I mean, I could just test that hypothesis, right? Wouldn't that be a testable hypothesis? I would just blink, and then we'd figure it out. Or I'd blink a numerous amount of times, and we'd figure it out. And I would blink without having cussed. So I think there's obviously ways we could, that seems empirical.
Yeah, but how would you be able to rule out the hypothesis that he'll shock me if I just say something that he dislikes versus just cursing?
Well, I would rule out the hypothesis as being less likely.
I mean, how would you be able, it sounds to me like you've already assumed that you've interpreted him accurately and that's being confirmed by states of affairs in the world. But you're saying that if those states of affairs don't match up, you're not accurately interpreting the intentions of this divine being?
Well, yeah, what I'm saying is that it would be just irrational to make an inference that if he communicates a message with me that aligns with the state of affairs, and then I know from that message that, or I'm going to assume from that message that he's trying to communicate with some state of affairs, like an assumption, just based on the first experience that we would have with this agent, similar to how our first experiences would be, and then. So then I noticed that so I've kind of interpreted that as just on its face value, like because I think that without any background information, the most tentative place to start would just be from face value, because we have no reason to infer intention. So I would say that, yeah, I think the more times that happens, we would be rational to infer that, and when I cuss, he intends to shock me. Now, you said something about how would I be able to disconfirm that from if it was just merely something he didn't like, right? Well, I mean, I think it's possible that the cussing is something he's already communicated that that's something he didn't like, and he would intend to shock me as some type of chastisement. But I mean, but what I'm saying is, if I see a correlation between the two, I could infer the intention based on past experience and the background information.
I don't see how you can rule out. I don't see how you can rule out claiming that there's some other divine goal that he has with the shock that's not being conveyed in the simple statement that if you curse, I want to shock you. How can you say that there's? How can you say that the hypothesis that he's actually going to tell you he's going to shock you whenever you curse, but it's going to meet some other important theological aim or divine goal later on down the line, another state of affairs? How would you be able? I can't see how you. It sounds to me like you're saying you're assuming that God's going to be, or that God, the divine agent God, is going to be consistent, but but that would assume that. I mean, that already assumes that you know what his divine goals are. But if his divine goals are just to make you think that he's shocking you for a specific reason, but he's just doing it because years later some other these shocks are going to lead you to go and order pizza from the pizza parlor down the street. How can you rule out that hypothesis? I mean, I don't see how the consistency can be is what you would need, and I also don't see how that's not something other people with other divine communications have access to. What would be the edge that you have to show that you're more accurately interpreting the intentions of God? Because you've only said stuff that other people have access to, on a level playing field, and I don't see how you can rule out other hypotheses like the one I've mentioned.
Okay, well, to first address the point of consistency, is the background information has been consistent with the experiences. That would answer the question of consistency. But now, how would I be able to rule out a different state of affairs of his intentions that were consistent with the experience? Well, let me give you an example with a girlfriend. So let's say that my girlfriend knows, or I know that when my girlfriend texts me, I need you to get some milk, that means my mom's come home. And then usually I've responded with that by, hanging out, at the park for an hour to avoid seeing her or something like this, right? So it's possible, so there's a possible scenario in which my girlfriend texts me, I need you to get some milk, right? And she's not intending to convey, or she's intending to convey to me that her mom's there with the goal that, or I think she's intending that she's, so I won't come home in an hour. But her true intentions are to buy herself time for her secret lover, right? So what I'm saying is, now I can't disconfirm that 100%, but I can use it in likelihoods, right? So my girlfriend, on every situation that I've noticed in the past when she's typed out that phrase, I've noticed that her mother has been home, and then I'd have other experiences with her, okay, with her as an agent, that would yield that she's been truthful, and I don't have any reason to think she would cheat on me, right? So when it comes to the God thing, we could just say that the reason why I rule out any other set is because they're just less likely on the background information, right? It's been consistent thus far with him intending to shock me because I have been shocked, right? So, now and then we could generate more background information from other experiences. So I could come to say, like for example, I could know that God is intelligent, right? he can have intentional states that are correlated with intelligence, and we could do that through some experience, right? For example, if I put down a math problem and see that he could solve it, and I did a few more math problems to see that he could solve it, I could infer that he possessed the quality of intelligence. Now, and think about something else. I could infer that he's rational if I were able to parse out maybe some manner of deductive arguments or logic and see he was capable of reasoning, right? So I put out, some logical equation, I explain it to him, or some argument. From that experience, he's communicated with me that he understands them, and he's consistent with what I understand reasoning and these deductive arguments, their logical form to be, and so on and so forth. Now, he might have some other intention or something like that. I mean, so could anyone else, right? They could, but we could infer that he's rational. We can infer that he's intelligent. I mean, there's other things we can infer whether he was lying or not, right? So lying would be knowing a state of affairs to be the case, or believing a state of affairs to be the case and reporting otherwise, right? So if I were to talk with God and we would agree that there's some state of affairs, right? That I'm 31 years old, so God knows that I'm 31 years old. Now, and if God communicated to someone else, just for say or whatever, that I was 28 years old, well then we would know that that was a lie, right? Or if he communicated with someone else that I was 31 years old, he was telling the truth. Just a lie being saying a certain state of affairs inconsistent with what he knows or believes to be. Telling the truth is saying a certain state of affairs consistent with what he knows or believes to be. So, I mean, there's a shitload of things we could infer from his intentions. He intends to be truthful. He intends to be a liar. He intends to be rational. He's an intelligent agent, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so, I mean, well, the argument is you're saying that there are a bunch of hypotheses that we could posit, but how would you be able to cut them out? For example, one of the things you mentioned is that we can infer that he's intelligent if he solves math problems. But I mean, I don't think from intelligence alone you can't infer that they would solve whatever complicated math problem you put on the ground. I mean, intelligent people purposely give false answers to math problems all the time, sometimes in order to make it so someone feels smarter, so they can go, no, this is how you're supposed to solve it. Sometimes because they see the person next to them wants to cheat on them on the test, and so they purposely write the wrong answer in order to fill it in later. Or sometimes he goes, look, I think that this sort of testing to see how smart I am is beneath me, so I'm going to answer this incorrectly in order to see if he still has faith that I'm in like a personal intelligent being. Any of those hypotheses seems like the types of hypotheses you can derive from the mere fact that this agent is intelligent. How would you be able to narrow down, cut out the ones as being less likely versus cutting out the ones that are more likely? Because they all seem just as likely, because intelligence alone doesn't allow us to predict that they would specifically solve a math problem.
Well, I think that we take if people can have the ability of solving complex math problems, and numerous complex math problems, that they possess a quality of intelligence, right? We can infer that they're intelligent. So what I'm saying is, I'm just saying that, I'm not saying if God never answered them right. I'm saying here's a state of affairs in which, if it happened, based on my experience with this divine entity, we can infer some things such as it being intelligent. So let's say if I put down 10 complex math problems in a row and he gets them all correct, right? Now, I mean, I guess they could have all been lucky guesses, but I think that would be less likely, right? I think what we would say is, okay, he must possess the quality of intelligence. It's more likely that he possesses the quality of intelligence. So I'm just saying, if that state of affairs, I'm not speaking to whether or not he decided because it was beneath him to answer them all wrong. I'm saying that there seems to be certain ways that we could, given certain experiences, we can infer intention. So what I would ask you is, if I were to put down 10 complex math problems, we had experience of an agent that could get the answer, would it be rational to assume that he was intelligent?
I
Or
mean,
would you not be able
the
to
thing
infer
is, the thing is you're saying that, well, an intelligent being would answer them correctly because they would know how to answer these questions. But I don't see how that is, you haven't, that's the hypothesis that you're putting forward, but why, what gives that hypothesis the edge over the one that I gave, the couple that I gave, the one about faith, the one about purposely getting it wrong because they want to make you,
Well, that's
they have
outside
some
of
other
the.
aim.
You're just changing the question. That's outside of what I'm dealing with. I'm just saying.
Outside
Okay.
of intelligence alone, you can't just infer that they would purposely, correctly answer every single. I mean, what would make it so they wouldn't do it just based on faith? They wouldn't do it just, make you think that you've given really hard.
Okay.
I mean, yeah. What
You're
would?
not listening. Look. I just appreciate if you would just listen, and let's do a thought experiment and a hypothetical. So what I'm saying is, let's not change it to
what
if he
makes
didn't
that
answer.
hypothesis more likely than the ones that I gave. I mean, you're saying if he gives the answer, then he would give the answer, and that would support your hypothesis. But I could say the same thing.
Okay, look, I'll be willing to. Okay, the conversation seems to be breaking down at this point.
I'm sorry, continue.
Look, so what I'm trying to say is, let's put all of those things to the side for right now and just speak about not whether or not he would intend to get them all wrong. Let's just take one set of observations and experiences, and let's just talk about them within this hypothetical thought experiment. So in this thought experiment, I put out 10 complex math problems, and in this thought experiment hypothetical, he gets them all right. Okay. Now, under this observation and this experience, is not speaking to any of the examples that you gave. We can talk about them next. I'd be willing to engage with them. On this observation and this experience, would it be rational to infer that he's intelligent?
I mean, you're saying that if he solves these problems that make it so that only an intelligent agent would solve, then he would be an intelligent agent. But I'm asking, how does that hypothesis have an edge other than just for the sake of argument saying it's correct? How would it have an edge over the hypotheses that I gave?
Again, we're just talking about these set of observations.
I've already answered.
Can you give a hypothesis consistent with the observation and experiences of getting 10 math problems wrong that's would be more likely, that you could argue for, that would be more likely than inferring he's intelligent?
I mean, I think I've already said this. I said that you're pretty much saying that if my hypothetical goes through, then my hypothetical goes through. But I could say the same thing about the hypotheses that I generated. If it's the case that God purposely did the problems wrong in order to test your faith, then it's the case that God purposely did the problems wrong in order to test your faith. I'm asking which which hypotheses could we make? I mean, based off of.
Well, look, if he got all 10 of them wrong, I don't think I can make an inference to his or anything about him, right? You know, I don't think I could make an inference in that specific case, right? But what I'm saying is, if there are minimally some specific cases in which we can make inferences, it could be, you've already granted that in the instance I've given, it would be rational to assume he's intelligent, then that's minimally one case in which we can begin to make inferences, right? So, okay, there's some cases where we can't make inferences, and there's some cases where we can. But I think that I could think of many situations where the inferences would be more likely. For example, the 10 math problems. We assume that to do complex math problems and get these 10 right, you would have to be intelligent, or you would have to have a lucky guess. Being intelligent is the better explanation rather than being a lucky guess, because it just seems too improbable for someone that didn't possess the capability to do these complex math problems So then we just infer that he's intelligent. Like another thing is, so that's just minimally one scenario in which we can begin to make some generalization or some inferences about God. I mean, I can think of tons. The second one would just see.
But if he answered them all wrong, we would have to infer that he wasn't intelligent.
No, I don't think we could infer that he wasn't intelligent. Like I said, because based on the examples that you've given, so what I'm saying is, I'll grant you that in the situation that you've given, it's not rational to begin to make any inferences there, right? Because doing that seems to be consistent with him still being intelligent but not doing it for some certain reason, or so on and so forth, right? So I grant you that there's certain sets of observation and experiences that we wouldn't be able to start making probabilistic inferences from. But what I'm saying is, minimally, if there is a set, even if it's a small set of things that we can make inferences, then you're kind of ceding the point that we can infer based on observation and experiences. So
yeah, but you just said that his intelligence holds in either case. And you're also saying that it seems we would need to have access to his goals, to his intentions, in order to decide which hypothesis to go with. But that's the whole point of the argument, to ask, how is it that you can say you have access to God's intentions?
No, what I'm saying is, without even having necessarily access to intentions, we just know that the scenario in which I put complex math problems and he getting them all right can only be explained by a lucky guess, or he possesses the quality of intelligence capable of doing those things. I mean, is there a third option I'm not aware of, or something like that?
He sent some other lesser being to try and solve them because he was too busy.
No, the observation is that this divine entity has himself solved the 10 math problems. So I'm saying we have 10 math problems, we have divine entity, he gives the answer to 10 complex math problems. So what state of affairs is compatible with this, besides either A, he possesses a quality of intelligence capable to do math problems, or B, he just somehow got a lucky guess? And on which one would we infer that's more likely, right?
No, I mean, what makes you think that you have you've actually seen the divine being? How do you know it's not just some lesser agent that he sent to do the problems because he has other like goals that day?
Well, how do I know that you're Joe Sonseed and not a shape-shifting alien that's assumed his form and voice?
Well, you have background experience with humans and not shape-shifting, I guess, reptilians. So you would have to, make an inference based off of your background experience with me and other human agents.
No, but
and
all my
Google
experiences with you could have been from the shape-shifting alien. Right.
Okay, so it just seems like you're making the thing worse, because we can't even use the background experience that we already have with other human beings. So how can you don't even have background experience with a divine agent to even try to inform an inference to that divine agent's intentions? I mean, if you can't even infer the intentions of humans based off of your background experience, I don't understand how that would make it so you can.
It's a reductio ad absurdum that shows you the same problem could be posed to you in the example of humans. So it's kind of,
but humans, we have background experience. What's the background experience you have with? I mean, I've explained.
Listen, what I'm saying is,
if you have background experience with other humans and human intentions, you can use those to infer the intentions of the communicator.
Listen, if you were to say that if this could not be God, right? What are the likelihood, or how can you infer that it's not just some other agent that he sent to do the math problem, right? Well, I would say I've had experience of God, right? And I know based on those experiences that this seems to match, right? Whatever those experiences were. Now, so what I'm saying is, just would be more likely that this has been God. Now, the only scenarios which is if all the background information is tainted. That means that all these experiences have not been with God. So the same would be true with the alien example, right? Either I've had experiences with Joe, and those experiences can lead me to generalize that this is most likely Joe, or every time I thought I've talked with Joe, it's been a shape-shifting alien of which the whole background information is tainted. So, I mean, both seem to, the problem seems to be posed for both of us regardless. Either A, I have spoken with Joe, and then I can infer from the experiences and observations of Joe that who I'm speaking to is Joe, or in the same I could do with God, right? So, but I mean, and all of that is just a huge red herring and a rabbit trail to sidestep.
I don't think so, because you're assuming, no, you're assuming that we have,
I would like to finish,
that our
if possible.
background.
Could I finish before you jump in? That seems to be a huge sidestep in a red herring kind of rabbit trail to whether, based on the example and hypothetical I gave, would it be more likely to assume that he's intelligent, right?
Yeah, I mean, I already told you, I think this is the third time I'm telling you that if your hypothetical is correct, then your hypothetical is correct. You haven't told us anything. I said that how can you differentiate between that hypothesis and the ones that I gave? And you said you couldn't differentiate with them based on the fact that the agent is intelligent. You then moved on to another argument that says that we are assuming our background experience with God in the same way we're assuming our background experience with humans. And if we don't do that, then we can't say whether or not we know we've interacted with shape-shifting aliens. But the problem is that anyone else who's saying that they have experience with God and they've accurately interpreted their communications with God through that experience can say the same thing. What makes it so you saying that gives you the edge over those other people? And the other thing is we have background experience with human intentions on a level playing field as well. How is it that that can be comparable to any sort of background experience with God if you can't even establish how you can say you're accurately interpreting the communications going on in that experience in the first place?
Like I told you, the same way that we do with other agents, namely humans, right? There was a point of time where we had no experiences, and then so the set was 0, right, when we were born and we were young, and then we start from having experiences and then generating probabilistic and generating intentionality based on the experiences and observations, right? Because, like I said, we know, even as a baby, we know certain things that we could, once we become able to reason, we can generalize things about humans. But that would only give us a small, it would exclude the thing like the cell phone milk example, right? We couldn't know that based on, you know, some inference just from our nature. We could only make that inference based on experiences. So at a certain point, the set's 0 would be prior to any experiences of other humans or agents, and then we start building into that set with accumulated observations and experiences, and the same would be held true to God, right? Or even aliens, for example. You know, any other thing that's not human. It doesn't have to be God. For example, if we met an intelligent species, like that we, or at least presume that we're intelligent, and then we could start with a 0 set and begin to come up with experiences with them. Like, for example, if I've seen an alien species, and then I could start to make inferences just based on observation. Like, to think about it, we could kind of treat the alien species like a bird, like not necessarily on intentional states per se, but we could say, we observe birds do certain types of behavior, and then we can make inferences that the bird, given this set of things, is more likely to do this or something like that. And so, I mean, the same could be true for aliens or whatever, just based on observations. And then, when it comes to intentionality, we would just have to understand whether or not it was an agent, right? Well, whether or not it was capable of mental states and sentience and so on and so forth, which I think is an easy thing to test. There's certain criterion that we establish with what it is to be sentient, have mental states, capable of holding beliefs, understanding truth, the nature of reality, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I mean, this is still stuff that other people who are claiming to have, you know, have received divine communication. This is still stuff that anyone else has equal access to. So it seems like their use of the evidence is just as justified as the use of the evidence that you're saying. It also seems like we can't narrow down which hypothesis, certainly not based on whether or not the being is intelligent. We can use our background experience to the best of our abilities in order to try and infer the intentions of human authors, but again, that's only something that everyone who is claiming, who is making a hypothesis and trying to argue that their hypothesis about their interpretation of the divine communicator is more accurate above other hypotheses run by other people saying they've communicated with this divine being. But there hasn't been any argument to show that you can say you are more accurately with your hypotheses, you are more accurately able to interpret the intentions of this divine being. Like again, with the example of the
That's
10.
just putting the cart before the horse. Like what I'm saying is, let's
I
not
wasn't
get
finished.
that far yet.
I wasn't finished. No, like again, it's about comparing hypotheses. Like I generated a hypothesis that was consistent with the example you gave. And I could just say, if that's the case, if it's the case that that's what God intended, then that's what God intended. But the whole argument is trying to figure out how you could say you're accurately inferring that that's what God intended in the first place.
Yeah, so what I was saying is, don't put the cart in front of the horse and talk about what justifies my interpretation versus the other. We're actually starting very, very small here. We're just saying, are there certain inferences that can be made simpliciter before we even get, because there needs to be some type of inferences towards intentionality that we can make basically before we can start arguing of whether we can apply these as rules, right? So,
I mean, the argument already assumes that there's intentions, because I'm asking you, how can you say you're accurately inferring the intentions?
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, so what I'm trying to say is that there's an actual way that we can begin to infer intentions, right? From that, like, you know, there's certain things like rationality that we have a criterion for. Of these criterion met, we could say that the intention was to be rational, because that's the only way that there's certain criteria can be met is if it possesses the quality of rationality. So there are certain things that just are unavoidable where the intentions can't be disguised, or so on and so forth, if we see a certain observation, right? If we see them being able to look at logical form and deductive arguments and go through them, we could say, well, he's capable of reasoning, right? So there's some observations that would let us know that he intends to be, reasoning, capable of intending to be reasonable or logical, or so on and so forth,
Would the divine agent not be intending to be rational by answering, by like making a invalid deductive argument?
Yeah, I agree. Again, that would just be like the other set that you posed. So there might be some certain sets of things where we might not be able to make inferences from them. But what I'm saying is, with those aside, if there are certain types of observation or experiences that we can make inferences from, okay, let's say if it's even a small set. So let's exclude if he, decided to mess up on the arguments on purpose, or decided to solve the math problems incorrectly. So we have the experience and observation of those things happening, solving them incorrectly, not being able to, coming up on the invalid argument, so on and so forth. and let's just bracket those. But let's say that the other examples that I've given, it seems to follow necessarily that he would have to be capable, or more likely capable of intelligence or capable of rationality. So what I'm saying is, there is some set of observations that we could begin to make inferences from, namely the ones that I posed. Now, if the ones that you've posed, we could just put a big question mark on those or an asterisk, that's fine. But what I'm saying is, minimally, there are some set of observations in which we could begin to make inferences.
Yeah, but we can make another, you're saying that the inferences that I've made, the hypothesis that I put forth, is, how is that a question mark and how is yours more likely? Also, Helena wants to know if we can open up the room.
I mean, I was just more or less, I wasn't interested in having like a, you know, like a hangout, a debate on the issue where everyone else weighed in. I just wanted to have a one-on-one discussion with you about the issue that.
Okay.
I'm not really. You know,
she just wanted me to ask you. But so I asked the question: what's making the hypothesis that I gave, the hypotheses that I gave, even if there were correct problems, but also if there were incorrect problems, what's making those hypotheses just question marks, but making your hypothesis not a question mark? I guess more likely.
Well, yeah, like, wouldn't you agree that if there's only a couple scenarios with the God being able to solve the math problems, right? Either he got lucky 10 times in a row, or 100 times in a row, 1,000 times in a row on complex math problems, or he possesses the quality of intelligence. And I think that it just seems that more and more and more times that, let's say we do 100,000 math problems and he gets them all right, we would say, okay, you know, at this point, it's just, the more math problems seem to take away from the probability of it just being luck, right? So what makes it more likely is just that'd be the inference, right? That, you know, the more and more testing that we do, more and more observations that we do, the more and more math problems, the more likely the hypothesis becomes that he possesses the quality of intelligence, because we assume that in order to do math problems, you need to possess the quality of intelligence, right? Like, you wouldn't be able to get correct answers to the math problems without the quality of intelligence unless you were getting lucky guesses. Lucky guesses were ruled out the more and more and more background information. So that's how we could make the inference. I mean, wouldn't you agree? It doesn't seem to be very controversial.
I don't see how that undermines my hypothesis that God just sent some other being to answer, like some other being to answer these equations. I don't even see how that would undermine a hypothesis that God is like divinely lucky, and so as a consequence would answer so and so number of problems in a row correctly.
He could be divinely lucky, but I just don't think that that's more likely. I mean, it's possible. Why? Right? I'll grant you. Well, like I just said, luck is something that you know, is, so like, for example, let's just look at luck in a simple sense of flipping a coin, right? Now, if we flip the coin, or no, let's do it. I can demonstrate it better. Let's talk about like a poker, for example. Let's say that there's certain poker hands, right, that going into the river with a flush draw versus, you know, already a made hand of like a straight, right? The flush draw would have, let's just say, like a 15% probability to make the winning hand on the last card. So the expected value would be 15%, right? So, but there's something called variance, right? That, you know, if we did it just one time, it's possible he could get lucky. But if we ran it 100,000 times, that number would begin to approach 15%. And if we did it 200,000 times, and the more that number amount of times approached infinity, the closer it would be to 15%. So the same thing could be applied, you know, like I said, to the math problems. And I I honestly think that the sending another agent is just a big to do it or whatever is just some big red herring. You know, I mean,
Based off of what? Why couldn't I just apply what you said to that agent? Why could I? What you have to have access to God's intentions to say whether or not he decided to send a being, or if he decided to come and solve these equations himself. What makes you? What gives you? Why? How can you justify such claim to accuracy? How can you justify a claim to
right, because
accurately
if I have
interpreting his
experiences of
intentions?
God, the same way I could rule out that your twin brother that you've been hiding in the basement for all these years, you got him to come and have this conversation with me instead of you, right? I mean, it's just more likely that that's not the case based on the experiences I've had with you. I have no knowledge of this being happened in the first place, or you would have, I have, no reason to believe that you do have a twin brother or blah, 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 blah. What I'm saying is, if I have experiences with God, and I could just generalize from those experiences that it's more likely that this is God and not some agent crafted to look like him. Just in the same way I could make inferences that it's Joe and not his twin brother. Now, it's possible that it could be an agent that he sent. It's possible you could be your twin brother that's been hiding in the basement all these years. But I just think that in both instances, based on our background information of experience with Joe, experiences with the divine, we can
But
rule
wait,
those out as
what is
being
your background experience with the divine that makes it so you know that it's not just him sending some agent to solve these problems?
Well, yeah, so it would be the same as like with Joe. For example, so I've met you, Joe, and I've known you for however long I've met you, and I've had however many interactions with you. And those interactions I've had with you are consistent, okay, with what I've deemed to be Joe, okay? So you speak the same, your cadence is the same, you seem to hold the same positions, you talk about the same arguments, blah, 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 so on and so forth. When you come on camera, I get the visual as well. And what I'm saying is, so based on these experiences, I can say that it's more likely Joe, because this is all these things I associate with Joe, with being Joeism. This is what it is to be Joe. And so I would just do that, and that started from the set of experiences that I had when I first met you. Before I met you, the experiences were zero. I didn't have any experiences of Joe, so I start from there. So if I have experiences with God, and then all of them are consistent, blah blah blah, I seem to have the same observations and so on and so forth, then I just say, look, it's more likely that this is the same entity that I've had these past experiences with. Why? Based on the observations that are consistent, right? I mean, we don't. I think as humans, we don't. That's just built into our nature, right? Of induction. We just say, we just make those generalizations, and I think I don't see why we would not apply those generalizations to God or to any experience, right? Even if it wasn't even an agent, we could, what makes me think that something is a tree and not just something representation made to look like a tree, Well, it's based on the experiences of trees. Based on my background information of the experience of tree, based on my background experiences of Joe, based on my background experiences of experiences with the divine.
Yeah, it seems like you're running into the same issue of saying that you could use the background experience, you could use the way you assess your background experience with human beings to assess background experience with a divine communicator, but that's something that everyone.
That's not what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you're
What I'm
saying
saying
there's
is,
a consistency, right? And that's something that
right,
you
between
use to
Joe, not
inform.
between all other humans. I'm saying there's a certain set of what I consider to be Joe, right? And it's not based on any other experiences with humans, right? It's based on my experiences with Joe, right? So I'm not inferring from other humans something about the divine. I'm inferring with my experiences of the divine to make inferences about the divine, and I'm making my experiences of Joe based on to make it, that it's Joe, right?
What are you inferring exactly from his consistency, that he's accurately giving you a message, right?
I'm saying in the terms of the math problem that it seems to be have intentional states or incapable of intelligence just based on the experiences that we've had and the observations of them being able to solve complex math problems. I've already told you that I mean, it seems like we're just going in circles.
Yeah.
If you want, we can transition to another thing that kind of goes along with this. Like it would basically have to do with the alien example that I gave to you.
That you what?
It took me about, remember the alien example I gave you that one night? It seems like it took me about 2 hours. I went back and watched the stream. It took about 2 hours before I got you to bite the bullet. But would you be
What
willing
is
to
it that
start?
you thought that I conceded, actually?
Well, so what I'm saying is, remember I started out the conversation with saying there's a few different ways we can start to infer intentions based on things we know about ourselves that we can, because we're human, we generalize to other humans, things of observations and things of our experiences, right? With that person, whether communication or whatever. And so the observations and experiences can overlap. But what I'm saying is that there were such things as the aliens that have communicated some message to us, right? We wouldn't be able to do the first one. We couldn't infer from us being human to make inferences that way. And we would have zero observation and zero experiences. So now we have a null set in observations and experiences, and we have a null set because we can't infer things about aliens to infer things about humans, right? The thing is, it seems like it would be directly analogous to God, right? If an alien, if we SETI, search for extraterrestrial intelligence, goes and gets a message from an alien race, and it says, we're a supremely intelligent, and let's say the communication came in English and it said something like, we're a supremely intelligent and advanced alien civilization that possesses very advanced technology. We have made the decision that your race is ultimately could be a threat to us in the future if allowed to persist because of your warlike tendencies. So we're going to give you the ultimatum, and this is all part of the message. We're going to give you, and this communicated in English, we're going to give you the ultimatum that either you destroy all of your weapons or begin the process of destroying all of your weapons on the planet within 24 hours. If you don't undertake that endeavor, then within 24 hours we're going to destroy your planet, right? So if that message is communicated, like I said, we don't have ways to infer from what it is to be human because these are aliens. We don't know what it is to infer from experiences and observations because we have none. Therefore, it seems like the logical, it would just follow necessarily from your argument that you would say that we couldn't begin to interpret that message, right? One interpretation of that message would be that the planet is going to be destroyed tomorrow if we don't begin destroying our weapons. Or one interpretation could be go buy a PlayStation 4. And so you'd be biting the bullet and saying that you would believe that both would be just as valid of interpretation, right? Because we have no way to make any inferences towards their intentions. So neither are more likely than the other, right? And actually, since there's an infinite amount of semantically coherent sentences, then we just would have so many that we wouldn't be able to choose, right? It's like saying that, we have all of these possibilities, none of which are more likely, therefore we wouldn't be able to choose any. So it seems like you would be forced to just say, or forced to advocate to NASA or SETI that it'd be most rational not to try to infer any. We wouldn't be able to infer anything from this message.
I don't see how. I mean, this is also running to the issue that we're working with our tools of interpretation that we have in order to interpret something that seems inscrutable due to our lack of background experience and our lack of access to the intentions of the communicator. But that's something that everyone here has. That everyone here can use equally in order to posit different hypotheses. It seems like that I mean, you're going to use the tools that you have in order to interpret something, in order to move forward. But imagine people, you know, who interpreted whatever messages by prophets for certain, you know, for a certain religion that said that the doomsday, or says that, you know, there are those here who will be around when the end comes, and then everyone in that generation dies, but they've told later generations about this prophecy. Is the later generation, after they see the last person in the previous generation die, to conclude that, okay, that claim by these prophets, by these communicators for the divine being, is it's false, or we can't say that we've accurately interpreted the intentions of the divine being, because it seems like there's a lot of examples where things
I'd be
have,
willing to bracket that for the time being, because it would. I kind of want you to engage with this alien example, and we could just stay consistently talking about this rather than we move from
that's
the example.
parallel to what you're saying. And I've already answered the alien. What do you think about the first part that I said, that it's just the same, it's the same issue?
Well, I mean, all you seem to say is that the same information could be used by everyone to make the same, begin to make. So what if God the divine revealed himself to everyone, right? Would that mean that would that mean that we'd be able to, I mean, are you saying that we can begin to start making inferences solely based on the fact that everyone has the available evidence, and the only reason we can't make inferences to God's intention is because there are some people that don't have the information? It seems like that would be silly, because
that's not what I'm saying.
Okay.
What I'm saying is that everyone has the same, everyone can posit, use the same, you know, use the same arguments to justify their interpretation is more accurate than the others. And so it seems like they're all kind of that they can all start on a level playing field. But what would make it so one of them has the edge? It seems to me like it would be one that isn't just relying on the same tools that every other person who says that they're accurately interpreting either this alien or this or a divine being.
Let me just ask you, because I'm unclear what position you're taking. I just try to answer closest to yes or no. Do you think it's possible from the scenario that I've given with aliens that we could begin to infer their intentions, and basically make an interpretation from that text that was generated, or no? Yes or no? Because I'm really unsure of what position you're taking.
I mean, I've said several times we would use the interpretation tools that we have available to us to make hypotheses. So yeah, I do think it's possible.
No. But are there certain of those hypotheses that are more likely than the others?
Well, it depends on the scenario that you gave. The scenario you gave assumed a lot of things like SETI and everything. So you can rule out one, like if it's SETI's looking for patterns, it's assuming that there's going to be patterns given by the aliens. So maybe you can rule out things that aren't patterns, that kind of thing. But there's none of that for a divine being. We don't have any. I mean, if we assume that there's a pattern, you still can't rule out the assumption that the being had some goal to make it look like there is no pattern in order to meet some divine.
Well, I'm not talking about patterns. I'm talking about actual.
Well, that's what SETI
would
said.
You be able? No, what I'm saying is, would in that case you be able to make an interpretation, right?
Yes.
Would you be able to, and from that interpretation that you make, would you be able to justify that interpretation is more likely based on some criterion? Because
more
if
likely
not, then
than other hypotheses, yes.
Yeah. So like okay. So you do think that so that seems to contradict your stance on the argument that you're posing. You're saying in the case of alien, well, I'll explain to you. You're saying in the case of aliens, we have no experiences, no observations, and no ways to make generalizations from humans
That
the
doesn't
alien.
stop us from trying to narrow down hypotheses.
Well, how? So you agree that the three things that I just said also apply to the divine. Before interaction with the divine, we have zero experiences, zero observations, and zero ways we can infer from our nature to the divine's nature. Same would apply to aliens, right? So
No,
is there
I
something
agree
else
that.
in virtue of something else of which? Because
Am
if
I
you're
not
saying
allowed to use SETI anymore? Is it just pretty much the equivalent of a divine being? Just the exact same thing? Because if it's just the exact same thing, then I'm sticking with the original argument I've been running this whole time. But if it's an alien in the sense that there's SETI we can use, that kind of thing, they've communicated to us in English. That they've come in like alien bot whatever, using these things I can use that in order to inform a hypothesis and in order to inform my cutting away less likely hypotheses. But if it's exactly
SETI
the
in this
same as
case
a
is just, it
divine
is
being,
exactly the same. Because in this case, SETI is just the means of communication, just like they're English and it's communicated through the satellites when it's using Greek and the communication is through method of handwritten text. So, I mean, it's directly analogous. So what I'm saying to you is you would be contradicting yourself saying that we could make interpretive inferences when they're directly analogous.
you can. I mean, I'm not saying you can't posit hypotheses in order
no, but
to
would one
try
be
and.
more likely than the other?
I mean, if
So
it's
if I
the
said,
case that if it's analogous, then I stick to all the arguments I've been giving.
so what you're basically saying is when that message come down from SETI, then unless we destroy our weapons, the planet will be destroyed tomorrow. And if, let's say, one scientist come up and said, I want to interpret this on space value, that it's more likely that our planet probably will get blown up tomorrow if in case we don't destroy these weapons. Another person comes by and says, well, I have another interpretation. I think they're just trying to convey to us that we should all go buy PlayStation 4s tomorrow. And you would say that both interpretations are just as likely because there's no way that one is more likely than the other, right? So you would
How
say
would you
that
differentiate between them? You have no background experience with these, like you said. If it's analogous to the divine agent that we've been talking about this whole time, how would you justify? How would that person justify it? They could appeal to the use of language, but how are they able to say that these aliens aren't using it in some sort of code, like when my girlfriend sends me the text message saying go get milk from the store, when she actually means my mom's over, so stay away from the house. I mean, what's to
what I'm
stop
saying
someone?
is,
What makes it more likely that it wouldn't just be going that we should interpret this communication with these aliens that we have no background experience with. We
right,
should
and I'll
interpret
tell
it
you.
to say go and get pizza.
Yeah. So this is what I'm advocating. What I'm advocating is in the case of the aliens, so I gave three reasons: observation, experience, and generalizations from our nature. So the nature one's out, but I still think, given the arguments that I've given, we could make observations and experiences from aliens. But at this point, we have a zero set. So I think what I'm advocating at this point to do is to take sentences on their face value based on their semantic meaning, right? So like words have meanings, okay, and those are just given by definitions and so on and so forth. Where words have common meanings, and then we would just take those meanings on its face value. So when it says destroy your planet, we take that planet to have a certain type of meaning semantically, destroy, so on and so forth, and these things seem to be incompatible or at least unlike it conveying to go by. Or we had experiences where we've had experiences where like that message has conveyed to us certain things. We might be able to change that. Advocating is until we begin to draw all observations and experiences into a set and make inferences based on those, and we have none. We can't generalize our nature. I think it's rational to take the statement on its face value, just based on the semantic meaning and short of experiences and observations, just use that to make an inference. So what I would say is this: if you're biting the bullet on this, it would seem like you would say that you would just throw your hands up, right? You would just advocate, look, there's no way we can even begin to interpret this. There's almost infinite number of semantically coherent
answer.
Statements.
Why are you assuming some answer that's not consistent with the answer that I gave?
Well, you said if it's directly analogous, then you wouldn't be able to say one's more likely than the other.
Directly analogous, we have the same issues that I've been bringing up this whole time.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is ultimately what that means is that there's almost an infinite number of semantically coherent statements or interpretations that can be made, and none are as likely as the other. And what I'm saying is
that's the problem. You can't rule out ones as being more likely, so you can't claim that you are more accurately interpreting the intentions of these communicators.
Yeah, I've already told you, in the times where we don't have any observations and experiences and we can't generalize from our nature, I advocate that we take it on its face value semantically without appealing to intentions. Up until the point that we have observations and more experiences. Now, I think that if we had more experiences with the aliens and we accrued more background knowledge, like for example, let's say that they say unless you begin the process of destroying weapons, we're going to blow up nuke one city a day. Then we've said, hold on, we can't make any intentions. We can't infer intentions, so let's just throw our hands up. 24 hours later, they blow up Paris. We say, oh, whatever, 24 hours later, they blow up Berlin. 24 hours later, they blow up Hong Kong. 24 hours later, they blow up Chicago.
This is the same as your math problem thing. You're saying that if I have an interpretation and then I go and find things that confirm that interpretation, then I've found things that confirm my interpretation. But remember with the math problem, I told you that it doesn't seem inconsistent with an intelligent being to purposely have give you inaccurate to solve the problems incorrectly. So if we get this message from the aliens and then they say we're going to nuke a city a day, if we don't see that that they're nuking a city a day, what is it that would make it so we can infer that they're full of crap? How do we know that to them they're talking about days over like light years or something, or to them they are just lying so they can have like a secret attack later? What allows us to infer which is more likely if it's the case that, the state of affairs makes it is that we don't see these these cities blowing up. You're saying that we just have to go with it on face value,
right?
But the thing about that is, how do we know that? Is it face value that we assume and that we've assumed based on it's face value that we've assumed based on our background experience with other humans? But what justifies using that on
it's based on semantics. So it has nothing to do with other humans, just based on semantics, meanings of words, right? Common usages.
But what justifies the assumption that the semantics lines up with these aliens?
And we would take it on face value. So if let's say if it said we would blow up a city a day in a 24-hour period, and then what I'm saying is if that didn't happen, right? Like let's say we wait 24 hours, we don't do anything, and they don't blow up a city, right? There might be based on a face value interpretation, we could just say we could have some limited set of things being possible, but I don't think none would be more likely. But what I'm saying is maybe not in that scenario, right? Just like the non-math problems weren't right, or the deductive proofs that weren't right. What I'm saying is face value, and we do have confirmation experiences that I give, it would just seem to start building more and more likelihood. So what I'm saying is a limited set of things that there may be exceptions, like the questions that you're raising, that would mean that we'd have a harder time or wouldn't be able to generate a likelihood under those observations. But I think in order to start inferring intentionality, we need minimally 1 or 2 cases where we could begin to get confirmations through observation of what our face value interpretation was. And that would mean it would be more likely, right? So, like in the example of the cities getting blown up, I think as more cities began to be blown up right at a perfect 24-hour interval, it just seems to become more and more likely that that was the right interpretation. And
Okay.
so what I'm saying is maybe the other ones we could bracket, but it seems minimally there are some experiences and observations that would be able to confirm interpretation.
Shamos, all you're saying is that if we see if our observations confirm my hypothesis, my interpretation, then our observations will confirm my hypothesis or interpretation. That's all you're saying.
So what I'm saying is we generate a face value interpretation, and we just kind of put a question mark on it, and then if we start to begin to see confirmation of the interpretation, then we can begin to infer that interpretation is more likely than the other, right? Which just would mean that there's some set of criterion, observations, experiences that can begin to make a probabilistic inference on which interpretation was more likely. That's all I'm saying. And I think I think ultimately people...
Someone could say that in order to confirm their claim that these aliens are going to have a surprise attack 5 million years from now. That's how they interpreted the message. And if it happens at 5 million years, if 5 million years from now there's an there is a surprise attack, then that confirms my interpretation. That's what you're saying about your. That's what you're claiming. You're saying
exactly.
that
I'm saying that there are certain observations that are consistent with confirming interpretations, right? Like the observation of your mom being the car in the driveway when she sends the message that go and get some milk. Like the observation of you grabbing a glass of water and me inferring you need sustenance, rather than, or like the observation of them blowing up a planet every 24 hours to confirm the interpretation that that's what they meant to say, that they were going to destroy planets every 24 hours. Right? Yeah, that's exactly what I'm advocating. And look, I'll just say this, because I think ultimately the issue is that we're working from different epistemologies. And I think that, maybe, in the not wanting to give any ground in the sake of a argument and this and that, the position that you're taking is actually less rational than the one I'm taking, because I would be willing to.
You're saying something that's tautologically true.
Please, I'd be willing to venture that SETI. Well, look, if you're going to go ahead and whisper under your breath or whatever, I can tell you might be frustrated. Would you like to end the conversation now?
I mean, you're just positing a tautology, so I mean, if you don't have
No, I'm positing a set of observations that I would, from my epistemology, would work for confirming an interpretation being more likely than another.
Yeah, but I just showed that you could say the same thing about a completely different interpretation.
Look, I'm willing to grant you that there are some other observations that may be inconclusive. I'd be willing to grant you that.
No, it's not inconclusive. I'm saying that it could be the case that someone interprets this message to actually mean 5 million years from now, they're actually going to attack us, and it turns out that 5 million years from now, they do actually attack us. Then they would have confirmation that their interpretation is accurate. But what I just said is, I'm saying that if their interpretation turns out to be correct, then their interpretation turns out to be correct. I'm saying nothing. And so that's what I'm claiming you're saying with your example.
No, I'm not saying if the interpretation turns out to be correct, their interpretation turns out to be correct. what I'm saying is, in my view, and I think on all other rational human beings' view, that there are certain observations that are going to confirm the likelihood of certain interpretations, right? It just kind of goes with what we mean by interpretation.
It's trivially true, yeah.
No, it's not trivially true. It's not trivially true to say that the observation that a car's been in the driveway every time your girlfriend sends you the message to go and get some milk, that it's been her mom's car, that it's trivially true that observation has confirmed the interpretation. That isn't trivially true. Something trivially true would be like a tautology, but that's not a tautology. That's actually informative. That's actually saying that
because it has like empirical content to it, empirical meaning to it. You've
Right.
given explicit examples, but you just said that there are certain interpretations that are going to be confirmed by certain observations. Of course.
Yeah, and that's one method of which we begin to make probabilistic inferences of interpretations, which you seem to agree on.
So how does that narrow down the different interpretations of what the aliens are going to do?
Well, the moment that a city keeps getting blown up on 24 hours every day at exactly a 24-hour interval, on my view, the interpretation becomes to be more likely.
Yeah, and so on my view, if 5 million years from now they actually started their attack, then that would make my interpretation that they're going to attack it 5 million years from now more likely. Do you see the issue?
No, I don't see the issue at all. What I'm saying is, if it were the case that that you interpreted it that way, right, and then you could give inferences to why you inferred from them saying 24 hours that it would be 5 million years, then I'd be willing to listen to what those inferences are. But if I'm just going off of face value semantic understanding, I just say 24 hours just means we know what an hour is, we know what the word 24 is. That's what it means. So I have a way of actually saying this was the inference that I made for what reason. Now, if there's some inferences that you have to make outside, because you couldn't be relying on semantics, you would have to be relying on some other reason to make that interpretation. I'd be willing to listen to you.
Sure, it could. There's codes that you're using. Are you not using?
Yeah, well, you just tell me the means you made the code. Yeah, just tell me the means of which you went through and deduced that from the text.
Okay, so what's their specific message? You don't think that from like a specific message that you laid out, I wouldn't be able to somehow make it so it could be interpreted to say 5 million years from now, we're going to attack Earth?
I'm sure on any different code, given multiple schemas, you could get it to say anything.
Sure, yeah.
You know? So, and that's fine. So what it is whether or not, I think that if there's certain things, like I think it's possible they could write in a code, and it's possible that could be the inference to make. And I mean, we would just have to go on whether the experience is confirmed or denied. So if it were the case that, what I'm saying is this: if you had the interpretation that it would be 5 million years, and 5 million years it happened, then it seems like that would be more likely than than somebody else with a code to go buy an Xbox 360. So yeah, I'd be willing to accept that. On my view and my epistemology, that would be more likely. And I think that that's what most rational people are going to hold to. Like, I think the whole endeavor of SETI is to say that once we get some pattern, or if we've got something more than just a pattern that was like a binary for, like the English language, a message in the English language, some binary, and then whether or not they would say, oh well, now we got an actual communication, not just a pattern. And it seems to be in English or something. I don't think they would throw their hands up. I think scientists would be willing to go through the interpretive method that I offered of taking it on face value until we could build up sets of inferences based on observation or experiences. So I think that rationally, your view would be in the minority. That scientists all across the world would not say, oh, let's just throw our hands up. They would be willing to start making face value interpretation.
Again,
so
I haven't said that. I haven't said that. again, you're assuming that you're saying that our predictions, you're predicting that if your interpretation is correct, it's going to be consistent with our regular understanding of the English language and what those words mean to humans reading English. You're saying that you're dang it. I kind of realized an issue that's happening. He's saying that the prediction is the observation that's gonna inform the fact that that our interpretation is accurate. But the whole point is that you're making a prediction in order to show that your interpretation is accurate already. Does that make sense to you guys? Like so if I shouldn't have said 5 million years. I should have said, okay, so it says in an hour from now we're going to bomb every single city. You interpret that an hour from now they're going to bomb every single city, and then 30 seconds later they bomb every single city. Wouldn't that confirm my interpretation that 30 seconds from now they're actually going to start bombing the city? It's like, am I talking crazy here? Am I making sense to you guys?
Well, did you guess that they were going to bomb in 30 seconds before they did it?
I mean, so they send a message. I guess he said their message is that in an hour we're going to nuke cities across the U.S. And then someone goes, wait a minute, this is a code. This I interpret this has to be a code. They're going to actually bomb us 30 seconds. And this is like one of just all manner of hypotheses that can be thrown out. And then 30 seconds later, the cities are actually bombed. So it confirms that hypothesis. But that's just saying that if my hypothesis is correct, then my hypothesis is correct, because my hypothesis is that in 30 seconds all the cities are going to be bombed.
Yeah, but that's how you see if those kinds of hypotheses are correct. Wait and see if your guess turned out to be what happened. And if it did, then you disqualify the ones that didn't guess that. Right?
Yeah, but he's saying that if it's disconfirmed that it's incorrect. But the issue that I brought up with 5 million years is that I mean, 5 million years later, all of a sudden everything gets attacked, even though we went 5 million years without seeing anything. Then it would prove the interpretation of their message saying that 5 million years. It's like, okay, you're saying intelligent design proponents, they'll say if there's an intelligent designer, we would see irreducibly complex systems. And guess what? We found irreducibly complex systems. But the whole thing we've been trying to say is what justifies the argument for why we would see irreducibly complex systems if there was an intelligent designer. It seems like we would see any manner of systems if there was an intelligent designer, because an intelligent person could just do things for aesthetic purposes. So what justifies that inference that if there's an intelligent designer, we would see irreducibly complex systems? It seems to me like you could say if there's an intelligent designer, we would see things looking pretty because this intelligent designer likes Georgia O'Keeffe. That's just as consistent.
Joe, breathe.
What's up?
Breathe.
I mean, the issue with dealing with tautologies is that you're talking in circles.
Well, but he's trying to say it wasn't really a tautology, and I'm not so sure. I mean, I think I might agree with him a little bit about that. Did he leave for good, or did he?
I don't know. He just cut out. But if
he left for good, I'd like to invite other people in.
I guess he's the one who he didn't want other people to come in. I think that, but I don't want the fact that other people come in to make it so he left, because I think that this is the issue that I need to like harp on.
I think so too.
He's actually making a hypothesis, and he's saying this is a prediction of the hypothesis, but it seems like he's also conflating having the background experience with the prediction coming true. And
yeah, it seems like a lot of the points he raised were kind of like along the lines of, if I made this prediction and this prediction were true, then my prediction would be true.
Well, no, he's saying if I made the prediction and the prediction were true, then that would be evidence that I could interpret what the alien says using the language that I understand to mean what I understand it to mean.
Oh, he's back. I just wanted to ask, did you guys ever, I had to step away for about 5 minutes about half an hour ago. Did you guys ever touch on that question I raised in the side chat?
No, we haven't yet. Do you want to bring it up real quick? I don't know how much time Shamos has left, but I also don't want to get away from this idea of whether or not it's a tautology. So, Shamos, how much time have you got?
I really don't know. My phone is only at 7% charge, so.
Well, why don't you go ahead and ask it since you've been holding on to it for so long?
All right, sure. 1 second. Yeah.
Are you gonna ask it?
Yeah, sorry, I had a mouthful of potato chips, dude.
Okay. Well, you're like, okay, yeah, sure. And then it was the silence.
Yeah, I just wanted to finish chewing and swallowing.
Dude.
Okay, so my question was, so like, if the divine being in question is, say, the Christian God, right, which is basically the foundation of morality, how can we mere squishy mortals make any inferences with regards to its intentions regarding morality?
I don't know. I'm not a divine command theorist. You'll have to ask the divine command theorist that.
Okay, there you go.
Fair enough.
So Shamos, what about this accusation that you're just saying it's tautology? I think you're not. I think you're saying, no, I'm speaking to my ability to infer intention. I'm not just saying if my hypothesis is true, then my hypothesis is true. I'm saying if my hypothesis is true, then that's a little piece of observational evidence beginning my background knowledge that I can continue to infer that when they use the language that in the way that I understand it, that's what they mean to do.
Yeah, I think that all humans do that. That's why I gave those 3 examples to start. One, firm intentionality is based on past experiences, right? That's the whole example with the girlfriend and the cell phone and the text message. That example is not done from an observation. I mean, so the observation experiences do overlap, but it's not done from just inferring something about our nature. Like there's nothing in human nature that would mean that when this message happens, it means her mom's in the driveway. I know that based on my experience with her, right? So I take that communication from the agent. Okay, so I'm interpreting. She's spoken with me, and let's say we were laying down in bed one night, and she just said, "Look, phone before, and I know she's a bitch, and I just want her to think that you're trying to avoid her. Mom's here. Don't come over for a while." Code, right? And the code would be, "I'm going to go get. Can you please go get some milk?" And that'll give you, just stay on for an hour or two. And so I've had the experience with her and communication with her, and then so what I'm saying is, let's say that so let's wait a way to disconfirm it through experience. So this would be the opposite. Say she texts, "Can you go and get some milk?" And then I do that, and let's say that, I could look down this one side street and see if her mom was there, right? Or I could call a neighbor and ask if they can go over and see if the mom is there. Just go over under some pretense, right? And let's say that I've done that a few times, and I've noticed
hey, she's given me the code, but her mom's not there, right? So that would be a way for me to disconfirm. Then you know what most people would be prompted to do next time they saw their girlfriend? Look, every time you gave me the code, and then I checked up and your mom wasn't there. So we'd be like, we would have some thing like, oh, you know, what other reason would she have to do this? So we would begin to infer other things about her intentions based on the fact that some experience has disconfirmed patient. And I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry that that's what all humans do. I mean, that's just the nature of how we interact as agents and how we come to make inferences based on experiences to intentionality. It seems pretty cut and dry to me.
Yeah, I mean, I gave that argument to show how you can infer the intentions of human beings, and because people say that you don't need to have access to human beings' intentions in order to interpret, you know, their actions or their communications, that kind of thing. But then the question is, what makes it so you could say that and have the edge over other people who say that they're more accurately interpreting a divine scripture? And I haven't heard that other than to say that if my prediction from my hypothesis that says my interpretation is accurate, if my prediction is correct, then my interpretation is correct. But you could say that about any interpretation. If my prediction that after I read the Bible, if I interpret it to have me go and get Chinese food in 3 weeks from now, and I go and get Chinese food 3 weeks from now, that's a confirmation that my interpretation of the Bible is correct.
Well, I mean, so I think that that's a disanalogy, right? Because we're talking about something. So we're inferring from God's intentions of the Bible that it will have some effect on me, right? Chinese food, right? But that's not addressing the intentions of the author, right? Whether he intended for you to get Chinese food or whatever it is. So you could go out and get Chinese food and say, well, look, I just read Psalms and I just have this weird feeling that, you know, that's interpreted as me getting Chinese food. And then you're the one that has the control over whether you go get Chinese food. Now, in the hypothesis I've given about the girlfriend, it's outside of my control, right? There's so you could be under confirmation simply by going and getting Chinese food, but there's not anything that I could do to make that, you know, it's confirmed or disconfirmed not on the basis of something I can choose. It's confirmed or disconfirmed on the basis of whether her mom's there or not.
Sure, you could choose to go there when the mom is there. You could choose to not follow the message.
But what I'm saying is there seems to only be two states of affairs. If she's communicated me the interpretation that it means her mom's going to be there, then either there's two states of affairs, right? Her mom's going to be there or her mom's not going to be there. If her mom's there, it confirms the interpretation. The more times that we have that, it gives me more background knowledge to say that that's more likely because it's been confirmed. Now, if I go there and her mom's not there, because it's just a dichotomy, right? Either her mom's there or not there, and then I start to realize that that interpretation seems to be less valid, right? I think most people that if their girlfriends told them that was the code for their mom being there, and then you went there 10 times in a row and her mom wasn't there, naturally most humans would say, honey, what the fuck? What's going on here? And you're saying what the fuck because you've had experiences that have disconfirmed the interpretation that she's given you, right? So you're saying, look, I thought we had a code. I thought you're telling me that this means your mom's there. But every time you've texted me this, your mom hasn't been there. What's the deal?
If I may.
What's up?
Wouldn't this kind of like feed into more like precept stuff? Because, you know, you'd be kind of taking God at his word that he exists, so to speak. And you'd have no way of confirming that other than by taking him at his word.
I mean, he's assuming that his but the thing is that either I could situate my example in the same way. It's a dichotomy. Either I go and get Chinese food 3 weeks from now, or I don't go and get Chinese food 3 weeks from now.
the reason why I said it's disanalogous is because you have ways to have confirmation bias over whether or not that's the case, right? So like what I'm saying is you have the ability to affect whether or not that interpretation is right. Like, people could that's just ways you could generate confirmation bias all the time, right? So what I'm saying is the reason why my example is different is because it's outside of your control whether or not the mom shows up or not, right? You could say, well, I interpret this as I will get Chinese food, and now I'm going to bring about a state of affairs where it confirms the bias that I have towards my interpretation. But so the example you're giving me is subject to confirmation bias. Mine's not, right? Because whether or not her mom shows up or her mom is there is not something I could confirm by some action of mine, right? Unless I guess I went down to her work and put a gun to her head and brought her in, or something stupid like that.
There you go.
It's not something. I mean, no. What I'm saying is, that's something that we wouldn't say. If I said, "Well, look, your mom was there," she would say, "Yeah, because you were the one that brought her here."
Yeah,
you see what I'm saying?
You would got Chinese food because you were the one who went out and got Chinese food.
If we just change Joe's example to somebody interprets the Bible to mean that his neighbor's going to go get Chinese food, then that takes care of that problem of him being able to influence the outcome.
Yeah.
Right. So could you deal with it like that, Shamos?
I mean, so there's other things that are going to be reasons for why your neighbor would get Chinese food, right? I mean, there's things that. So what I'm saying is, and this is something how we weed out things all the time, right? Like, we weed out certain things. Like, for example, if every time you read Psalms, the interpretation was that your neighbor would get Chinese food, and every time you read Psalms, your neighbor went and got Chinese food in every single situation, then I mean, it seems as if there seems to be something there, right? There seems to be some correlation, but I think that there might be another explanation around that. Like let's say that something is the case, like you read Psalms at 2 o'clock on Thursdays, and 2 o'clock on Thursdays is Chinese night for his family. There's other ways we could go about doing that. So there seems to be.
Yeah, it's kind of like a correlation. This doesn't imply causation type thing.
Well, it's not even that though. But I mean, you can do the same thing, like you said. It seems like the same issue. I mean, you can interpret it. You can interpret the text message to be literal, because it seems like, the most rational thing to do is just to go, okay, well, this says to go get milk from the store. I'm going to go get milk from the store, come home, and I'm bringing milk home. But clearly that's the incorrect way of interpreting the message, because the background experience that I have should have informed me and should have led me to conclude that I need to interpret this as a code telling me not to come home, not to get milk from the store, but to stay away from home because her mom's there. But that's because I had background experience and I had access to the intentions of the author of the coded message. What is that for things like the Bible that gives you the edge, that makes it so you can say you're accurately? Yeah, but it's
based on a set of experiences, right?
That's like what I just said, but what's your experience? I
told you, it's that we could still use the same example. Whenever X communication is rendered, Y will be the state of affairs. 10 times out of 10, when X communication was rendered, Y was the state of affairs.
Yeah, so, but 10 times out of 10, I go get Chinese, or I see my neighbor go and get Chinese food. I see Helena go get Chinese food. 10 times out of 10, my interpretation that I'll see my neighbor come home at 6 o'clock 10 nights in a row has been confirmed.
Listen, the more and more times that this happens, and that we can't. So what I'd be willing to say is this: the more and more times that that happens, let's say you've been able to test that 10,000 times, right? And you've been able to test it in such a way that it's not just on Thursday nights, but it's every time you read Psalms, right? And you've read Psalms 3 times in the night, and you saw your neighbor go out 3 times in the night to get Chinese food. The more and more that happened, yeah, I would start to think that there was some type of correlation, and that your interpretation would be more and more correct. I mean, I would definitely say so. But I mean, so yeah, I would. The more and more, and there's like, you know, it was like with the blinking example. You know, like if I think that it's not merely with me cussing, but it's me blinking. Well, there's ways I could disconfirm or confirm that, right? Cuss and then blink, blink and not cuss, so on and so forth. You know, and the same type of things could be used with the reading of the Psalms or whatever.
Wait.
So what I'm saying is, if what happens is there's some correlation perfectly every single time, and it seems to happen like on the drop of a hat every single time you read Psalms, then yeah, I would think that that would be a valid interpretation. I would obviously think that would be a valid interpretation.
But
One thing that kind of jumps out at me-
you're appealing to things that you can confirm, like predictions of like events later on. But the thing is, like, what's the inference that would make it so you can confirm like prescriptions in the Bible, like honor thy mother and father, that kind of stuff?
I mean, I still think it would be a bit hasty to be getting into specifics when we're still fighting over the battleground on whether we can infer any intention simpliciter. Not. So what I'm saying is, it'd be like trying to argue over applied ethics without having a discussion on meta ethics. It's like you know, there's some certain steps that would come first. So I mean, I think that we're not even that far. We're putting the cart in front of the horse.
No,
You know,
but
we
that's
still
what
need
the
to agree
question
on.
is asking, because people say that they're accurately inferring the intentions of God in inferring these different like prescriptions from the Bible, like honor thy mother and father, don't steal, don't commit adultery, that kind of thing. What would make it so someone could say that they're more accurately interpreting God's intentions in affirming these prescriptions?
Yeah, I mean, I could just say I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem to really matter in this. I mean, I'm not even arguing for the Bible or for Christianity at this point. We could just be talking about any supernatural agency. So, I mean, it's and in fact, I've already, you know, spoken that I'm not a Christian. So, I mean, I really
say
really
some other
don't-
thing. Say just some divine being coming down and telling you, look, Shamos, don't.
You could just use the example I gave earlier, which
No,
would be
but that has something that has like a description of the future events. What about just prescriptions? What about if the God said, don't curse? What would justify an accurate interpretation to that divine being, like you know, his prescription, to his command that you shouldn't curse?
There's no.
Or, actually,
It depends. Well, think about objective morality. Now, if there are mind-independent, you know, categorical imperatives, right? Then it just means you ought not murder because it's categorically immoral, right? And so, but there's not like a state of affairs which confirms that. It's just a meta-ethical. It's not an issue of empiricism, right?
Exactly. How would you?
It's a metaphysical issue.
Yeah.
So
How would
saying
you
is
say that you're accurately interpreting these prescriptions then?
How would you say that we're accurately interpreting objective morality if when prescriptions we don't see they're not empirical issues, right? So what I'm saying is, isn't it possible that you're just asking an ill-formed question? That
how is that
certain
ill-formed?
Well, obviously,
people say they're accurately inferring the prescriptions from the Bible all the time.
Excuse me. Obviously, that the question of whether or not there are categorical imperatives or prescriptions that are categorically morally imperative is not an empirical issue. It's a metaphysical issue. It's not empirical.
So you can only accurately interpret God's intentions if we're dealing with empirical data?
What I'm saying is there are some issues that aren't confirmed or disconfirmed empirically if they're metaphysical questions. I think that's obviously true. Like if you were to ask, you know,
Yeah, but
you know,
would you be able to say that you're accurately interpreting those things? It sounds like you're saying you can't because they're not empirical. Shamos, you're muted.
well, I said it kind of depends on the nature of the prescription. So when we issue prescriptions, there's a bunch of things that we could mean, right? Like one prescription is that you know, don't do that because that's an action I don't prefer. Another, you know, there's so many different ways that what we'd have to understand what we mean by a prescription. You know, if like in the terms of morality, just to stay on base, if there were a like a moral prescriptivist, what they're saying is that moral statements are not categorically imperative; they're just commands, right? They're just it's saying when you say murder is wrong, it's saying don't murder, right? So it's reflecting some type of command from the agent. So I mean, it depends what we mean by prescription, and I think there's various ways we could interpret that. So we'd have to get into the specifics. Because I mean, I think there's not just one type of prescription, and there's different intentions behind different prescriptions.
Yeah. So I mean, it sounds like we can't infer God's intentions when he makes prescriptions in like scripture, for example, or even when he does it when he commands people like through like personal experiences. We can't say that we're accurately interpreting his intentions when we're interpreting like some communication to say, you know, walk your dog 3 times a week.
Yeah, I would fundamentally disagree. Like, I think there are certain prescriptions that if God's trying to say, you know, don't cuss because, you know, I have a certain type of preference against cussing, right? And then, so when he's saying don't cuss, he's really saying that he has the intention of not liking cussing, right? And then, you know, he's going to use some type of punitive thing like shock me or whatever. Then, I think that, and he knows that shocking, you know, hurts me or whatever, and that, you know, there's some way that he could condition me not to cuss or something like that. I mean, it'd be similar to the child who every time she doesn't share a toy or she pinches another kid, she gets a spanking, right? Or her mother's saying, don't pinch kids, right? And then the way that we kind of infer that intention is to see that the intention that my mother doesn't like me pinching other kids is that she spanks me, right? And I mean, the similar inference could be drawn with God, on my opinion.
Okay,
But if someone says that, if someone goes, okay, God commanded not to cuss, and someone just kept on cussing, would that mean that would be, and nothing happened to that person? That would mean that God actually didn't prescribe us not to cuss?
Well, I mean, you could just use it similar to your mother. If your mother allowed you to go around and pinching kids, then we'd have legitimate reasons and she wasn't doing anything to chastise you for it, then we'd have a legitimate reasons to think that she wasn't against that in any way, you know. Whether or not, I mean, there might be reasons she didn't want to spank you, but she could put you in timeout or something. There's certain observations that we could observe to infer that she doesn't like something, you know. And I think that the same would hold true for God.
Yeah, I mean,
I've
you're
just noticed, like,
saying that if there's things that confirm that things will repercussions occur if we don't follow these prescriptions, they would confirm that we should follow these prescriptions. But the thing is that people claim that there are all sorts of prescriptions and different divine revelations, divine communications, and but they also claim that you know, but people also interpret them in such a way where one interpretation, it's clear that someone's breaking such a prescription, but in another interpretation, they're okay with that kind of bending of the rules. How do you know, like, so it seems like there are any states of affairs that would be consistent with a lot of these prescriptions, like honor thy mother, thy father. Someone could interpret that as just being, look, when you're older, you should honor thy mother and thy father. But when you're like a 3-year-old, it doesn't matter. Or someone could interpret it, look, you have to be a 3-year-old in order to honor thy mother, thy father. But the only way it seems to me that you think that would be, we would know that that's an accurate interpretation, is if a 3-year-old doesn't honor thy mother, thy father, and like some divine being like electrocutes the 3-year-old or something. If we actually have something that confirms that ends up confirming our conclusions. But a lot of prescriptions aren't that way, like honor thy mother, thy father in the Bible, or like
well, presumably there's some
commit.
states of affairs.
Yeah.
I mean, presumably on the Christian worldview, there are some states of affairs that are going to come about with people that don't honor God's commandments or something like that, right? Whether it's confirmed or disconfirmed in this lifetime. But what I'm saying is, we need something to confirm or disconfirm an interpretation, right? There has to be something, right? And whether that something is inferences from human nature, inferences from observation, or inferences from past experiences, all of which are going to be some way to confirm an interpretation. Always. That's what we mean by having an interpretation that's more likely the case than not, right? It's just been confirmed by some type of experiences or whatever else.
Yeah, but I mean, the problem we run into is that, like a lot of the prescribed stuff in the Bible, for example, this is stuff that you're only judged for, in the next life, so to speak.
But not even that. Like, some people think that doesn't have the repercussion of us going to hell, or some people think that it does have repercussion of us going to hell. The thing is
that's another
that
problem there. But even if the Bible just said, like, if you steal something, you're going to hell, we would have no way of confirming whether or not that is actually the case.
Yeah, what state of affairs would be inconsistent with an interpretation, with someone's interpretation of honor thy mother, thy father?
Well, I'm saying I'm not really sure. When it comes to that, there could be various different interpretations. Like I said, I'm not saying that I have the exact understanding of exactly what the Christian scriptures mean. What I'm saying is, in a simpliciter sense, that I think that it's possible to go around a process that we can begin to make inferences towards a being in intentions who's not humans and we haven't had observation or experiences from. Now, whether we got more in-depth applied scenarios, whether or not I could go ahead and make these vast generalizations, I think it would be based on, I'm just saying in principle, right? I'm not saying that, look, I'm not saying that there are any of these things, right? I'm just saying that in principle, I mean, I don't even believe God exists, but what I'm saying, or that I'm agnostic to whether the supernatural exists. What I'm saying is just simply in principle that these things could be the case.
Yeah, but any interpretation is equally as likely. Like, I can interpret the prescription, honor thy mother and thy father, to mean that I need to go and get Chinese food every Thursday. What makes it so that interpretation is less likely than an interpretation that says I should go and get pizza every Friday, or that I should honor thy mother more than thy father because mother comes first?
Well, I'm saying, like, in the case of if a divine being was saying that, you ought honor thy mother or thy father, then maybe, like I said, maybe he's just communicating some type of preference or some type of, feeling towards that being right, or whatever communication there are. And I mean, through our experiences with God, I think we could work towards that being more likely the case than not, right? So, like, I mean, if, through some experiences, God is, communicate us the benefits of such thing and such not or whatever. I mean, it would be, what I'm saying is, in principle, there seems to be a ton of things that could confirm or disconfirm that. Like if you tell me, like, for example, if you give me the prescription, like, you ought be a nice guy. I mean, I would confirm. I mean, I could interpret that as, look, Joe prefers when I'm nice to people, right? And there's certain things that I could infer from that, like if it is the case that I should interpret it as Joe likes me to be nice, then I would interpret there's certain things that he would be pleased with, right? He'd seem to be pleased with that, right? And I mean, you could just tell me you're pleased, you could smile, you could do whatever, or and I know that from our experiences that when people smile, they're more likely pleased. Now, I'm not saying we could generalize from those things to God, but what I'm saying is, if there's some type of experiences that God gives when he's are consistent with him being pleased, and we experience those instances, then I believe it would go ahead and confirm it. Like, for example, if we want to talk about Christian theology, I mean, we could just talk about Jesus, who was thought to be God and a human. So, I mean, there's, in terms of Christian theology, which I'm not even really interested in going down that road, but I think that the Christian would have a pretty hefty objection towards you, since God is undertaken is said to have undertaken the being a man, right? And he had the same type of nature as humans. Like, he had to poop every day and eat for sustenance and so on and so forth. So, I mean, even from the Christians, they're going to tell you that, and Jesus is thought to be God on Christian theology. So there are certain things that we could generalize about. So God understands what it's like to be human and has undergone those things, and we can make generalizations that way as well. So I think the Christian would be supremely well equipped to combat that example. Like, for example, a Muslim wouldn't have that same objection. Muslims view God as simply other, and he didn't come down as a man, and he didn't have the same generalization of experiences and nature that a human did. So, yeah, I mean, a Christian's going to have a supreme objection to that.
Yeah, which interpret, I mean, it seems like you can argue for any states of affairs to be consistent. The Muslim perspective, the Jewish perspective, the Mormon perspective. It's the whole point of the question is asking, how do you identify the correct interpretation? How do you identify the most accurate interpretation? And one of the ways you do that is you try and say that you are accurately inferring the intentions of the author. But if it's through our previous experience with the author, you're saying that the author is saying you're interpreting what I'm writing correctly, and it's a prescription, then you're just saying that the communicator told me that his communication is accurate, so that's what justifies my interpretation of that communication. But that's just you're just saying you're just begging the question. The whole point is, how do you interpret them, and without appealing to like the actual thing you're trying to interpret itself. But that's what you're doing when you appeal to like other like other experiences where he communicates with you. You've already assumed an interpretation that's accurate with respect to God's intentions in order to claim that you've
It's what we do with
accurately
humans all the
interpreted.
time, other agents as well.
Yeah,
and like
sure,
I said,
but
we start with a null set, and then we work into those things based on prior experiences. So
yeah,
it's not begging the question, because that's exactly how, when you were born, you had no experiences, and you could only make very general inferences based on your nature.
yeah,
Right?
exactly.
Which aren't going
You
to
can
get you any
use
closer to.
you use other things in your background experience, background information, to corroborate your initial interpretation, right? Like with my with my girlfriend sending me that coded message. She and I watched a movie about French resistance people who sent a coded message in a newspaper, and she's like, "Oh, that's a great idea," and so when I get a message from her that says go and get milk from the store, and I go, wait a minute, she's lactose intolerant, and why would she think I would go to the store? I hate going to the store. Well, we just watched that movie. I mean, I'm using other things in my background experience in order to justify my inference as to my girlfriend's intentions when she's sending this message, right? So
Yeah,
what
I
about
already
that?
told you there are certain things in which those examples can be confirming an interpretation or not, like the mom's car being in the driveway. Look, we're just repeating ourselves when we were already down this road an hour ago.
Yeah,
I mean,
what would make it so? What would make it so?
If you don't accept the reasoning,
I'm sorry, I wasn't finished
listen.
talking.
If you don't
I
accept
wasn't
it,
finished
listen.
talking.
I'm not going to go through being circular for another hour. I'm saying if you didn't accept the
Shamos, I wasn't
the
finished
answer an
talking.
hour
If it's
ago,
okay, I would like it.
it's not okay. If you didn't accept the answer an hour ago, you're not going to accept it now.
Shamos, I just want to finish my point.
Okay.
So if you're saying you're accurately interpreting the intentions of a communicator, then what? Oh, he left. We were going in circles, but I don't.
You kind of were.
He's saying that if he has evidence to demonstrate that he's accurately interpreting the intentions of an author, then he has evidence to demonstrate that he's accurately interpreting the intentions of an author.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting from this.
That's the issue with this argument. It's like either people are kicking the can down the road, or they're, just saying something trivially true like that, or they're begging the question. Like he's saying his previous experiences with the author are, and his interpretation of what those experiences entailed allow him to interpret what the author is saying. But you need to have other things to corroborate that, like with the girlfriend example. And if he says, I mean, yeah, that's an issue with this art. I mean, it just shuts things down, and so you end up repeating yourself, and people get upset at you like that.
I'm starting to understand why MK didn't let you do this in his hangout.
Yeah, I mean, I can. Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, EF doesn't like. He really doesn't like this, and it is understandable because, like, yeah, they do ask EF questions a lot. They do, like, they do put him on the spot all the time. But I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
like,
I think he and DD calling you like his stalker, I think that was completely out of line.
Yeah, but I don't know. I want to talk. What do I need to?
I want to talk about this.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I was surprised that you weren't objecting to Shameless's hypothetical god or creature or whatever when he was talking about the cussing thing and the math and stuff like that. But so you must have been doing that because you think it doesn't matter, right?
No, I think that you could just say, I mean, well, there's two things. He is just saying, look, if I have evidence showing that my interpretation is correct, and I have evidence that's showing my interpretation is correct. But the other thing is he wasn't able to show how God answering all of those questions, all those math equations wrong, would show that God is not intelligent. The only way he would be able to do that is to say that he had access to God's intentions, and his intentions were to really, really try and answer those problems correctly, and he did, and he messed up on them. But that's what the whole argument is asking for.
Well, but he could So wait, wouldn't he just, I don't know, devise some other experiment to, to get at the God must be purposely answering incorrectly or something like that, right? Like he was only saying that if the creature, this hypothetical God, which is nothing like any God, really, right? That's why I was interested in the alien thing, because this could work if it was an alien more easily, because it doesn't go up against our ideas of what this God is. But I think what he was saying is if it answered correctly, then that would be evidence for us to infer that it had intelligence. And not that if it answered incorrectly, it would mean it doesn't, it can't have intelligence. It still could have intelligence answering incorrectly.
Yeah, that's the issue. Like both states of affairs, both predictions are consistent with the hypothesis. So the hypothesis works with it's not constrained. If it's not constrained, you need to be able to like demonstrate how you can disconfirm the hypothesis. A good way to say that is to say, well, no, if it is the case that God didn't answer these problems correctly, then that would disconfirm his intelligence. But he can't say that because intelligence doesn't give us enough to work with. It's too vague. We don't have anything to. I mean, intelligent people purposely answer incorrectly all the time.
But a non-intelligent. I mean, I understand it's vague, but go with it. A
It would go with
non-intelligent
it, yeah.
wouldn't be able to answer correctly.
Mm.
So, if it answered correctly, you could rule out that it was not intelligent.
Well, then there's the other issue I mentioned, remember? One of the other issues was, what if it was just God, his intention was to like sleep in and have like one of his angels do it. And the angel knew math, and so the angel went and did it.
Yeah.
What rules that, out?
Absolutely, but I mean, you could construct some creature that you could see, and it's the same creature that comes every time, right? So then you would just be making these inferences about that creature.
Yeah.
So, but it was weird. I was really surprised. It seems like so the cussing example, right? Where the creature is this bizarre creature, right? Who's always in front of you when you want him to be, and knows English, and says that it's going to shock me every time I cuss, and then every time I cuss, it shocks me. And to me, that is pretty good evidence that I can trust my interpretation that he wanted to shock me and that he intended to.
Yeah, but how could you even connect that with a divine being?
Well, I agree, but you didn't argue that.
I argued it last time, and I don't think he understood. And frankly, I forgot, to be honest. Right? I mean, that seems like the action's consistent with a douchebag, a human. I don't know. So I'm like losing my voice. So I know that, like, I really wanted to try and do this argument by myself. So I had like people just like yelling at me to say this, and I'm like, no, because.
Oh.
It might actually be kind of effective to run that argument against like an actual Christian, right? Because then you can bring up the book of Job, where Job is this pious man who was, very faithful to God, and all of a sudden this bad shit starts happening to him for no reason.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like again, Picasso was he was a genius, and he could paint like really detailed, like realistic images too, but his intention was to make money. Like he ran out of money all the time. One time, in order to get like quick money, he went to the junkyard, got a bicycle handlebars and the seat, and made it look like a bull's head, and sold it for thousands of dollars. that was his, that was his intention with that piece of art. But I mean, he could have. How can you say that? Well, that's obviously a smart person because he knows how to get money. Think about people who purposely make jeans with rips in them because that's what's in fashion right now. Why would it be like?
Yeah, or you can go a slightly different direction with that, and you look at Picasso and you say, okay, he made a lot of paintings. Either he loves to paint or he needed money. Which one is it?
Okay. I said I was. Yeah. I need to. Someone else talk. Tom, we can't hear you if you're talking.
I haven't said anything. I've just been listening.
In like 5 minutes, you guys can tell me what I messed up on.
You mean besides everything?
Well, I don't think Shamos ever really answered the question about. I mean, he seemed to want to selectively appeal to Christian theology at certain times and not at other times in an opportunistic manner, which I don't really get that, but
it didn't. I mean, he gave an example of a prescription. I mean, the point reminding me that it's an issue arises with prescriptions, because clearly those are things that people want to say they're accurately interpreting. I mean, I didn't even know that was asked of Matt Bell.
Yeah, well, Matt Bell had a really interesting answer to that, but it took, I think it took like several hours to get to that question. Like he dodged it for a few hours, and then he finally said that the inference that he would make was an inductive inference, I think, and I think that was surprising because I think it was expected that he would say it was an abductive inference.
Not a deductive?
Because, yeah, I don't see how you could say it was a deductive inference, right? But that's the whole point of the argument, right? It says that if you're making an inductive inference, what is that based on? How do you make an inductive inference with no background information?
Yeah. I mean, it's like people are so sure that this is a stupid argument, but I mean, there's only 3 types. Every single type of answer, like response that we've gotten to it, has been put into those 3 categories. They're kicking the can down the road, saying, "Oh well, there was humans that were divinely inspired," or they're begging the question by saying, "Well, proper exegesis will allow us to better interpret the Bible," or the Holy Spirit assures me that my interpretation is accurate, or they're saying something that's trivially true. If I have evidence supporting my interpretation, then I have evidence supporting my interpretation.
Right.
But like, there's only so many times you can say that to someone where they won't just go, "All right, this fucker's not."
Yeah, Matt Bell did that a lot too. He was like, "This is stupid because like, if I had an argument to counter this, then like, I would counter your argument."
Well, but the Holy Spirit one really, really gets me, because to me, once someone says Holy Spirit, there's nothing you can do.
What do you mean?
I mean, once someone says it's the Holy Spirit, you just have to go, okay, whatever. I don't see how you can argue against that.
In what context?
Any.
Like, you mean they just sort of appeal to God works in mysterious ways type thing?
Right.
Like God Okay, yeah, I agree.
Like, I think Rev answers this by saying, no, the Holy Spirit ensures that my interpretations are accurate.
Right, that's just begging the question, though.
I mean, who's the author of the thing you're trying to interpret? It's the Holy Spirit, right?
No, the author would be, God in whatever, I don't know what Rev, I think Rev thinks that God influenced the humans. I'm not sure, but the author of the script would be God, but the Holy Spirit ensures that his interpretations are accurate. What do you do with
So
that?
the Holy Spirit isn't God?
No.
Wait, I'm sorry, what? No, can you, I guess my
I
question
think the point is that that there's just an appeal that's being made to sort of like some entity that, well, sort of, works in mysterious ways and sort of fills in the gaps.
Yeah, but then the next charge is what everyone has the ability just to say that. What makes it
Right.
that you could say that, and that it happens that in so doing, in saying that, you have the most accurate interpretation of the text?
Well, if you say that the Holy Spirit would, give me the proper interpretation of X, right? You're already begging the question, because you're saying that this, God has a property of he wouldn't lie to me or something like that, which is already under fire. You can't say that.
Well, it is like saying that, and but that is what they do. That is what they think.
It's like I wrote a book, Helena, that told you to come and make out with me. And you're like, I don't know if I should, I don't know if this is him saying come and make out with me, or go and kill Tom. And I come to you and I say, no, just come and make out with me. To say that, the guy who you're trying to interpret is confirms that his interpretation is correct is just, you're staying entirely internal. You're begging the question. You need to have what is the justification outside of merely me saying, no, just come and make out with me. And we have that all the time with other human beings, like with the example with my girlfriend and the text message. But what is that with, God? But it's claimed that it's our experience with the Holy Spirit that would make up that background experience. But we're asking you, well, that assumes that you've interpreted that background experience correctly. It assumes that that interpretation makes it so your interpretation of the Bible or whatever, like later experiences, is more accurate. But the whole point is, how are you able to interpret his communication or her communication accurately in the first place? I'm not going to run this argument anymore. But you should kill Tom.
I'm just still a little bit interested in why you granted this bizarre kind of God. I figure it's because you figured
Because
it was irrelevant.
The argument itself is, I think it is more generalized. It is just, how can you how can you claim to have access to the intentions of a divine being in order to say that you're accurately interpreting their actions, not just communication, their actions? And so I think that, well, there's several things. I think you can run the argument without, some people think you have to get them to agree to skeptical theism first, and then you can run the argument, and it's true, it's a lot easier if you get them to agree to skeptical theism. But I don't think you have to. And what is it? One of the answers to the question you just asked is simply because I forgot to ask, how do I know that this is just a divine, how do I know this is a divine being speaking to me? And I guess that was kind of implied by my question, how do you know it's not just some angel solving the problems, because God couldn't be, he didn't want to deign to solve math equations for someone. But that's not explicit, right?
I mean, you could even propose that it's not even some sort of conscious entity, right? It's just that, like, Helena, every time you cuss, there's some sort of causal disposition that causes you to get shocked, you know?
Well, you're going down the God can't have intentions in general argument, right?
I don't know.
Well, this is the argument. I mean, the argument is that one of the how is it that we can differentiate between actions that are you know, that are intentional versus just causal dispositions? You know what I'm talking about now?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Do you want me to continue or no?
Helena, are you interested?
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
All right, so how is it that we can differentiate between the two, right? Causal dispositions versus intentional actions.
I think we can only do that if we're talking about ourselves.
Well, another way is to note that intentional action, you can fail to have your intention to map or track with your action. Like, for example, say you're throwing darts at a dartboard and you want to get a bullseye. You throw a dart and it accidentally hits Tom. My intention was to hit the bullseye, but I failed to do so.
Right. But you're the only one who knows that.
Well, that's just, I mean, that's a way you could tell that. That's a way you can describe intentional actions. To say that your action failed to map with your intentions. Now, causal disposition is just like a lightning bolt striking a tree instead of striking the barn. Like, you wouldn't say the lightning bolt failed to strike the barn.
Right.
Right. Causal dispositions are, it's just a series of events or causal sequence that leads to the states of affairs. There's no failure involved.
I get that.
So one way you can see an intentional action is to identify a way in which the agent who has intentionality could fail. But the thing with God is posited as a being who can't fail. If he can't fail, then how would you be able to differentiate his or her actions from just causal dispositions?
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. So the argument is like God has no intentionality or no mind.
Yeah, I don't see how he could.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard yet anyone accept sort of this definition, this normative. Well, then again, who wouldn't accept it? But then also argue that God has intention or intentionality anyway, right? I think that they just say that. They don't. I haven't ever heard anybody argue how it could be.
I almost got close to Nicholas Strode, but he was interested in something else. MK was on my nuts, and when I finally asked a question, he railroaded, and I went, "Wait, did you hear my question?" And he just said, "Oh, I thought you were just making a rhetorical point." And it's like, oh, you know what you're doing, but whatever. The normative part, I can't really, like, it seems to me like to say it's normative, I would have to just be familiar with explicitly why it's normative, whereas I can just say it's reasonable to, identify intentional actions by the fact that the intention can fail to map with the action. I don't need to mention any normativity, although I'm sure that's important.
Are you just saying you don't need to use the word normative?
Yeah, I don't need to appeal to it. I also find that I think people get hung up on it as well. But I mean, I need to read. There's a paper that I need to read about it. Are you in the intentionality argument group?
I think so.
All right. So is Jack just here to be here?
I think so.
I'm like a policeman. Just, stands around menacingly trying to discourage crime.
What did I mess up on, Jack?
No,
I think Helena made a good point.
You haven't seen me pull out my billy club yet.
Oh, God.
Because there hasn't been anything to beat up on. But when there is, you'll feel the force of the.
Well, Aaron just asked in the live chat, how in the world does an intention demand a potential for failure? This makes absolutely no sense at all.
It's not demanding. It's saying that one of the ways we can differentiate between an intentional action and causal dispositions is that an intentional action has a possibility of failure. And then it asks, well, if that's not the case for a causal disposition, how would we be able, if you think that God has a mind, he has intentions, how would you be able to differentiate between God, who cannot fail his actions, and just causal dispositions? Because we would say that if God intended the lightning bolt to hit the barn, he can't fail, so the lightning bolt's going to hit the barn. But neither can just the causal disposition. There's no failure involved in the lightning bolt hitting the barn. It didn't fail to hit the tree next to it, right?
What's the is there an apologetic, or I mean, what's the response that would reconcile intentionality and causal dispositions? Is there one?
I have no idea. I don't think it's not a familiar argument in the literature, so I don't think theologians and theistic philosophers have really responded to it.
Well, I mean, the issue and the reason why I don't run it yet is, besides the fact that I need to actually, read the background literature on it that is available, at least with topics relating to the argument itself, is because I don't see how, besides just saying what I said, I don't see if someone goes, well, I think that you can still demonstrate that someone or something has intentions, even if that someone or something can't fail. And because it doesn't even seem like people know what the response is. Like, that's why I've been holding off. But it's really interesting to me, the argument. I wish that guy Ryan would actually write up something about it. Coffee says that I've jumped on the Power Ranger bandwagon, that intentional states are normative states. No, I don't, because I'm not philosophically informed, or especially informed on these concepts. I don't think I can say that. Like, the only way I can actually give the argument is to say that, you know, intentional actions are those which there could be states of affairs where the intention doesn't map or track with the action.
So Aaron has written something in the live chat, but it seems to me like he's saying the same thing. He said, no, an intentional action is a use of means to achieve a specified end.
Yeah, but does that mean that you can't fail?
Here he is. No,
Sweet.
Hold on, here he is.
I've never actually talked with him.
He's amazing.
All right, cool.
So Aaron, it seems to me like your description, it has implied in it this idea that you can not meet the specified end.
Getting everything ready. We can't hear you if you're trying to talk.
I think he's going to try to come back in.
So how about the Warriors game last night?
With no Warriors game.
Is that that's the team name that you came up with? Warriors?
No, I was talking about the Golden State Warriors, which last year were you know, pretty popular.
Which last year were background noise of a restaurant. Oh my god.
Oh yeah, they were just popular last year. They still are. I mean,
Dang it, I don't know anything about sports.
well, I know that MK likes basketball, so that's why I said that.
Oh, okay. I remember I wanted to construct a an argument to demonstrate the problems that I was having with MK and the moderation and everything, and I wanted to use, the Chicago Bulls in this example, right? But I forgot explicitly where I was going with it.
Well, I think there was a point where in some G Plus posts, MK was, I think, petitioning to be either the manager or general manager of the Chicago Bulls. He was listing, his corrective actions and things he would take and stuff, and his credentials.
I think they should give it to him.
Aaron's having trouble joining.
If I get disconnected, I'll be back in a few minutes.
Is the link not working? Because I found that sometimes on mobile there's this thing where, like, the links don't actually load properly, and you need to kind of add them to the call.
Oh, I'll try adding him to the call.
I guess, yeah. Beer.
I think he's already. Although.
See, I'm the one who ran the argument, so I don't want to just say BRB, because who's going to talk to about it? I guess Jack will come back. Yeah, BRB.
He's not on a mobile. I wonder, I know the URLs don't work anymore, but maybe I'll try to give him the URL just in case.
I just have to jump in the shower, but I thought I would add that somebody said they had the movie Face in the Crowd playing last night. I don't know if you know that movie, Helena. It was Andy Griffith's first film.
No, I don't.
Directed it. I've actually never seen it, but they had it on TV yesterday on Turner Classic Movies, and my roommate was watching it. And Andy Griffith said, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed.
that fits. Well, I don't know that Aaron's going to make it in, and I think I probably ought to close it down.
All right. Well, I'd like to talk with you later to ask you some other questions, but I have to go meet my friend for dinner. So.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll take it.
I'll message you later.
All right. Sounds good. So I'm just going to take it off air, and Aaron, I'll keep it going off air in case you manage to make it in, at least for a little while, at least for another half hour or so. All right. Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Shamos.